Hey everybody, it's Dr. Carmen Bryant. This is Car Chronicles. How you guys doing? You doing all right? Well, all right, let's do this. Remember I told you guys, and we talk about it over and over and over again, a narcissist is not going to take responsibility or accountability for anything. It could be anything. You can leave the toilet seat up. It doesn't matter what it is. They're just not going to take responsibility or accountability. And the sad part about it all is that you try to explain over and over and over and over. And some of you actually say they just don't get it. You know, once I give them this information, they retain this information. Everything is good for a day or two, and then they go resort or they revert right back to what they were thinking or where they were in the beginning. That's because of the fact that they know what you're saying. Why do you have to keep repeating yourself? Even a child knows no. But if you don't impose any type of consequences, then of course they just go back into what they were doing before. What really is happening is that narcissist is training you, and they're training you to keep moving your boundaries. Boundaries is like a fence around the house. You probably heard me talk about this before. It's a fence around the house. The fence protects the assets that are inside of the fence, not what's on the outside of the fence. If you have a dog and someone crawls over into your yard and the dog bites them, you're not responsible. They can't sue you. But if your dog gets out from behind that fence and your dog's a vicious dog and bites or injures or maims someone, you are now responsible for what your dog did and the injury. But if you're crossing over into the boundaries, the consequences are what the consequences are. And most of you guys, you set up boundaries, but you keep moving the boundaries because you operate off of emotion. You can't set boundaries and then be all emotional, and then every time someone manipulates you, especially a narcissist, manipulates you or love bombs you, you keep on moving those boundaries further and further away. But the first thing you say is, I'm telling you, I'm not going to accept this. I'm not going to respect this. I don't like this right here. But that's all you ever say. There are no consequences behind your words. Never, ever give a narcissist an ultimatum. Because sometimes you don't like the ultimatums. You think that if I give them an ultimatum, it'll force them to change. No, it won't. Sometimes you get upset because of the fact that you've given them an ultimatum. They go by your ultimatum. And the only reason why they're going by what you're saying is the fact that they know that they can hurt you. And they know that they're going to push your boundaries. If you give a narcissist an ultimatum, you better make sure that you follow through with the ultimatum that you give them. If you do this one more time, I'm done. I'll give you a little story. I'm going to give you a little story time. 22 years being with a narcissist. At the time, I was with him for 18 years. And one thing that he had a problem with is infidelity. He was community property. Always with somebody. So he hadn't changed. He's still the same way. Matter of fact, his friends used to tell him back in the day, a dog is always going to be a dog. In other words, a tiger can't change his stripes, right? So they already told him, it doesn't matter. You'll change for a few days, a few months, because you think that she's going to leave. But you're going to go right back to what you were doing. A dog is a dog. That's what you are. And what ended up happening is it got to a point where I finally understood my value and I emphasized my boundaries. And I had to think, because I'm not the type of person that to give someone an ultimatum or say something and then not follow through with it. I understand the power of words. And I understand when you set your boundaries out there, when you put down your foot and you give a person an ultimatum, you better make sure that you follow through. And I'm the type of person, I'm very careful when I do that, because when I do that, I stick to what I say. I don't go back on what I say. And what I said is not if you do this again, because he always got caught up. And what it was is he kept getting caught up. He kept having affairs. He kept getting caught. He always got caught. But what it was is I turned a blind eye. I forgive him. I had hope. The hope is the last thing to go. I had hope. I kept, pushing those boundaries, and I'm tired of this, and I'm tired of you doing this, and I'm tired of you doing this. Okay, what does that do? You telling that narcissist, I'm tired of this. I'm tired. You're hurting me. You're doing this. You really don't care. You need to change. You need to this. You need to do that. All you're doing is showing your hand. You're showing them what kryptonite hurts you the most. And what happened was it got to a point where after all those years, after 18 years, I finally said, not if you do it again. What I said is when you do it again, this time, I'm not even going to ask you any questions. This time, I'm gone. That's what I said. So I knew that night when I got up, well, it wasn't even that night when I got up. I just sat up. And when you have a soul tie with someone, when you're connected with someone, soul ties are not always bad. Soul ties, best friends, children, you have a soul tie. But when you're connected with somebody, you can tell when something is not right. And I sat up in the middle of the bed, and I knew right at that moment what he had connected with another woman. Whoever he was with at that time, he had connected with this person. He had gotten with this person. And I knew, because I started crying, and I was like, it's over. I knew it was over, because I knew I was standing by what I said. I set my boundaries in place. I've given an ultimatum, and I wasn't going back. This was what it was. And what ended up happening was that next morning I got a phone call. And I normally didn't get a phone call early in the morning like that, but you could tell that the phone call was very anxious. And he was trying to see what I knew. Calling to see, this is very abnormal. This is very out of character, so I already knew. You had already answered my question. And so from that point forward, I stood my ground. See, that's why I tell you guys, Don't be so quick not to go by your shanana. You know, if you got that intuition, if something's not right, go with that. That's a red flag. Something is not right. But I knew right at that moment. I didn't say very much, but I knew right at that moment. And from that point, he knew I knew something, but he was trying to get me to say what it was that I knew. And so I started changing. My character started changing. So I started asking questions. You know, why are you doing this on the taxes? Why is this right here? And asking this question. And I remember he got to a point because I wasn't saying very much. I was very monotone. I was very, you know, and you could tell that I had changed. My mindset had changed, and my mindset was more of, how am I going to get out of this? What's going to happen? And you have to remember that I'm in ministry as well. So I was embarrassed about the situation. I wasn't sure how my pastor was going to take it, you know, but the one thing that she gave me the freedom, my mother gave me the freedom when she said, let me tell you something, baby. She said, it comes to a point where you're going to have to put your foot down. It comes to a point where you're going to have to make a decision. Number one, age is blind. But number two, she said, you're going to have to come up. You have to make a decision, because if you don't make a decision, if you don't put your foot down, you don't set boundaries, he's always going to do the same thing over and over again. And so I put my foot down. And throughout the course of the few weeks, he began to realize that my whole attitude had changed. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't worried. I wasn't asking any questions. Remember, I said it. I wasn't asking any questions. And then he started yelling at me. Why are you asking me these questions? What's wrong with you? Why did you change? Don't worry about this right here. No, I need to know this about taxes. No, why do you need to know that? You don't need to know this. Now, number one, I'm a grown woman. You know, I'm a grown woman with kids. Not only am I a grown woman with kids, you know, I'm a grown woman married, supposedly, to a grown man, a grown child man. But all of a sudden now it becomes a problem. You being accountable about the finances. I need to know about the finances. And what he did was he liked to impose that shock, you know, when they implement fear. You know, fear is one of their biggest weapons. Implement that fear. And he just showed up at the house. Now, he flew in from wherever he was at, a 6-hour flight, to show up at the house. He shows up at the house. I open the door. He didn't hug me. He didn't touch me. So I already knew he knew, and he already knew I knew. And I didn't say very much. And what he did was he tried me. You know, I want a divorce. And in my mind, I was like, thank God I don't have to ask for it. So, you sure? He said, yes, I want a divorce. You sure? Yes, I want a divorce. You sure? Yes, because you've never trusted me. You've never forgiven me. You never forgave me. No, what it was is you don't want to be accountable. You know, you went right back to doing everything that you were doing before. As many times I forgave you, what it is, you want me to shut up and just let's move on with life. No, this time I was holding you accountable. Ladies and gentlemen, this time you have to hold them accountable, and you have to count your losses. It doesn't matter how much it hurts. 22 years is a long time. At that time it was 18 years, but 22 years was a long time where you have lost yourself, where you think you're not beautiful anymore. Who would ever want me? I have these kids. I have this debt. You've left me in debt. You're going to play house with another woman, but yet you got a house and bills to play for. While you're taking my money and you're spending your money, you know, you're pretending that you're rich and famous. Well, you're taking the money out of the house. You're taking the money out of the food. You know, it was wintertime. I didn't even have gas to put in the car for us to have heat in the car. I had to ride around on a car that had no heat, and I had a baby because of the fact that he was impressing other women. So think about it. Some of you guys were in that exact same situation, and you wonder to yourself, how do I keep allowing myself to go back to this? Now you have to remember, why did I leave in the first place? The one thing that I kept in mind is, and for those of you that are believers of Christ, you understand, I said, God, listen, I said, I've made many mistakes. My picker is off. And the thing that I said was that I'm not going to do it my way ever again because I made a mistake. I made a horrible mistake. I knew the day that I got married, that evening, I knew I had made the biggest mistake the moment I said I do. I knew I had made the biggest mistake in my life. And throughout my entire marriage, I knew, or situationship, I knew I had made a mistake. I was wrong, and I tried to fix it. Ladies and gentlemen, you can't fix another person. If another person doesn't want to be fixed, they don't want to be fixed. And once you've accepted their nonsense, especially within the dating, you know, once you've accepted that nonsense, and once you have shown them that your boundaries are easily moved and that it doesn't take very much for you to change your mind and keep forgiving them and keep forgiving, when is enough enough? When are you going to put your foot down and say enough is enough? Listen, some of you guys like, but I got kids. But I had kids. He had taken all my money, you know, from the military. I had to start from ground zero. The thing that I came out of, I came out with a degree, I came out with some experience, and I came out with my past experience prior to the military on how to hustle, because I was a single parent before. I knew how to hustle. I was a hairdresser. I knew how to do hair. There was a lot of things that I was able to do, to include in therapy. And so I had to maintain, I had to do things for myself to get myself back on my feet. Don't tell me there's no way out. Don't tell me that you can't do it. That's a lie. You can do it. You have to set boundaries, and you have to stand to those boundaries. If you set an ultimatum and you make an ultimatum, make sure that there are consequences to crossing your boundaries. Make sure that you follow through with that ultimatum, because it's time to heal. It's 2K24. It's time to heal. It's time for us to move on and do bigger and greater things. Your healing is right here.